It's a pleasure to be able to present to you our new logo and our concepts for the future. Recently in Paris, I was asked by the President and Council of the International Society of Craniofacial Surgeons to present my ideas for the future of craniofacial surgery globally. In order to do this, I had to reflect. Firstly, I reflected on Paul Tessier, the founder of our great discipline, and in particular on the very nature of his contribution. So indulge me a bit as I want to spend just a few moments sharing that reflection with you. And then I want to move on to discuss why it was that I was asked to give the talk in Paris. And indeed, that had to do with the unique nature of what we have been able to achieve here in South Australia. And finally, they were insisting that I talk about the future and how all of these things come together with modern technology to be able to give us imaginatively an idea of how this sort of healthcare, and indeed healthcare in general, might be fashioned in the future. And how we here in South Australia are well placed to be at the forefront of this. And in doing so, how our foundation supports delivering advanced health care to craniofacially deformed people through patient care, research, and advanced education. With respect to Paul Tessier, he was a strong man, a man of his time. He had difficulties in establishing the discipline in which I've been working for 50 years. So what's new? And he formulated some very basic principles. These principles are the sine qua non for the effective delivery of this sort of health care. They can't be melted down. They are namely that you need cooperation between disciplines. You need an adequate workload. If you can't do it, you won't be able to. You need to be able to do the work over and over again. You need a proper educational system. You need a multidisciplinary team, and you need to understand the pathology. And he set out for us not only how you would do some of the surgery, the techniques, but he set out a list of the patients upon whom you could operate to their benefit. And he set out how much of this work you needed to do in a week. And he set it out how you should operate in any 1 year to be able to attain and maintain the necessary skills. All of this was encapsulated in an article that he wrote and a presentation he gave in Melbourne in 1971. And that's a very important document. And sadly, I think, in some ways, like a lot of history, gets forgotten. Let me move on to some of the achievements that have been made here in South Australia. I'm a very passionate supporter of our state, and indeed our country, but our state is a unique place. This foundation has supported these initiatives from the very beginning. The one that our international society was most interested in was the way in which we were the forerunners of establishing the Asian Pacific Craniofacial Association by having Asian patients come to Adelaide, courtesy of our state government, and establishing all the relationships necessary to facilitate that. We not only were treating people here, we were treating them in their own country, educating them, and there was an enormous amount of soft diplomacy that followed from this. We had a presence in various trouble spots, and at the bequest of both our state and federal governments, we were able to participate in the solution of issues. And there are many, many other stories to be told. When we had established relationships with Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, Thailand, Hong Kong, we were approached by the Chinese who sent us the first patients to come out of communist China, and who sent teams to us. And we assisted in setting up the craniofacial units in Shanghai, Beijing, Nanjing, and other places. And to this day, that relationship is very strong. Further north, the Taiwanese, Japanese and Koreans were already well advanced in providing this sort of health care. And at this stage, we put the proposition that we should have an Asian Pacific Craniofacial Association. Just think for a minute. You can imagine that was not easy, to bring all these people together around the same table and get agreement. You only have to look at the current tensions amongst all of the people in that region, but in particular between the two Chinas. However, we managed it. And with the help of our federal government and the help of our state government and the very good will of key members of the healthcare systems in each of these countries, even people who were not involved in craniofacial surgery saw the unique value of this type of approach, this multidisciplinary, cradle-to-grave approach, and it wasn't long before we were able to bring into existence our very excellent Southeast Asian Society, which has met every second year since its first establishment. Initially, we had the first and most difficult of the meetings in Bali. You can imagine, it was considered to be a very neutral and somewhat attractive territory, so people came. The second meeting was held here in Adelaide, and we have subsequently had one other meeting in Adelaide, and since that time, this organisation was able to facilitate connectivity, was able to participate in telemedicine, the transfer of expertise, patient care. Many of the patients from this region have come to the Australian Craniofacial Unit. Many of them have been assisted by this foundation, both in their treatment and in the research that has emanated from their clinical presence. It wasn't long before we were able then to bring in experts from the East and the West, from Europe and from the Americas. Here, and in particular in Adelaide, courtesy of the Australian Craniofacial Foundation, and to have what were at the time unique educational opportunities not done anywhere before this, with operations being beamed from the Children's Hospital and the Royal Adelaide Hospital, with direct video links, as you would at the football or cricket, with an operative centre at the Festival Centre in Adelaide, and for week-long periods analysing some of the greatest problems that existed in our region. Underpinning all of this was the observation that in this north-south corridor, not only was there present the greatest density of craniofacial abnormality in the world, but also the chance for us to work in the same day because of the time zones. If you are trying to do this across time zones, you have to work in the middle of the night. So this was unique. It also provided the stimulus for each of the countries, Australia and New Zealand included, to form their own national societies. And we were at the forefront of this. And until quite recently, the International Society of Craniomaxillofacial Surgery, the Southeast Asian Craniofacial Association, and the Australian Craniomaxillofacial Foundation were run from the offices here in Adelaide. This unique cooperative venture has been recognised by our colleagues around the world as being something special and to be emulated. It was able to be done because of the unique nature of us here in South Australia. Not Sydney, not Melbourne, here. The Renaissance city-state, the right climate, the right level of educational sophistication and health care, the right size, the right people, and an enlightened democracy with just the right management by government. This enabled us to do things that others could not. Now, the next thing that I was asked to do was to extrapolate into the future. This was a pretty big obligation for me in front of my world peers. Use my imagination and to see how things might be in the future. The key to this was imagination. The communications that we now enjoy that are so rapidly advancing were not in existence 50 years ago. What one can do now with the mobile phones you all have in your pockets, in those days you needed to have a computer that filled a whole room at the Children's Hospital. This massive Hewlett-Packard computer that can't do the thing that's in your pocket. So in any one day now, we can quickly transfer pictures, information, and construct extraordinary networks. With respect to imaging, clinically, the radiology that we had 50 years ago told us very little about the pathology with which we were dealing, literally flying blind. Now we can see right into the depths of the human body. So using our imagination, how might this be in 50 years? I was able to ask the question in Paris to the audience, how might the youngest person in that room be practicing surgery 50 years hence? It's hard to imagine. How might it be with virtual reality, where one can create these extraordinary images and use them? How will teaching, learning, and scholarly activities be conducted in the future using this technology? In particular, what will be possible in the realm of surgical training and performance appraisal? It's a reality now. Imagine how it's going to develop in the next half century. Imagine how it is actually developing as we speak. Space travel has brought some wonderful things. It's brought us more effective nappies. But think about that. But also the capacity to manipulate machines at a distance. So how will healthcare centres, operating theatres, etc., be in the foreseeable future? How modern will our modern hospitals be? Add to this tissue engineering, where now we can actually grow organs in the laboratory. That is not a fantasy, it's a reality. With microvascular surgical techniques, these can be transferred. We know that we can effectively do face transplants. So if you pull all of these things together, the time zones, the communications, the education, and we focus again on delivering healthcare to the craniofacially deformed, this foundation has always supported advancements in 3 areas: the patient care aspect, the research that underpins it, and the most important umbrella covering all of the activities, education. And with these 3 things in mind, we have embarked over the last few years on bringing together a revised direction for the foundation that focuses on these aspects both for us here in South Australia, for Australia, and globally, in order to play a major part in promoting the delivery of healthcare to the craniofacially deformed in a truly advanced and imaginative way. And to that end, we intend to support those efforts that fulfil Tessier's original vision and the 6 principles that I have drawn from those principles on a statewide, Australia-wide and global basis. Cooperation is vital. It is the fundamental modus operandi. Cooperation between individuals, between disciplines, and between units. We believe that in taking this approach, will enable us to enhance and support the model of care and for us to remain at the forefront of this sort of healthcare delivery. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. It's been my pleasure to talk to you.
But I wanted to ask you about a couple of things. The Tessier Awards. This is an enormous, significant achievement. How many other people have been awarded this?
I think it's 3. I think it's probably, I can't recall, I think it's the 3rd or the 4th time it's been awarded. It's not given every year.
So you were the 3rd recipient?
I think so, yes.
And you knew Paul Tessier personally. Can you just tell us a little bit about that, an insight?
Well, when I was training in England and craniofacial surgery first came on the scene, it was his name that brought it. I thought this was pretty special, and my enlightened chiefs in Bristol, who were World War II people, they were very special people, they said, look, you should go to Paris and see this man. Off you go. And DC3, hedge hopped from Southampton across to Orly, up the road to Hospital Surrey, and you followed him around. I met him, didn't take any notice of me at all. There were lots of very famous people there. But he took my name and gave me a chit to say that I could come again, and then he sent telegrams, and every time he did a serious case and he was promoting it, he sent me a telegram and I went. And then I continued going, and one day he noticed me, and one day he took me to dinner, and then another day we became friends, and then we became colleagues, and then I knew him right up to the time of his death, etc., etc. And so that's how it was.
He was a big thing professionally, but became a friend of yours. How emotional or how significant was that for you personally then to receive this award?
Well, it was very special because his widow was there, and I can remember trying to learn. He wouldn't speak English, you see. You had to speak French. It was a bloody nightmare. And having dinner at his house was an unreal experience. And anyway, I'd be here swatting up my French and trying to not make a fool of myself. And anyway, we had several of these wonderful meetings in his house. And at the dinner, there's a special dinner put on in Paris, and his wife, widow Morel, was there, and I went over to see her, and I got a big hug and a kiss, and she said to me, it was a very emotional thing for me, she said, Paul, he really loved you, he used to think you were very special. Whether it was true or not, I'm not sure, but it really was a big thing for me.
You didn't know that at the time?
I didn't know that at the time, no.
And it was a big thing for South Australia, that award.
Well, Jessica, I've been on about this for a long time. Believe me, I have suffered so much nonsense the minute we set this thing up, some people came from Melbourne and said, you're not allowed to do this, it's got to be in Melbourne. You can't do this. This is the Collingwood syndrome. Everything starts and finishes there. And so this went on. No one else in the country was doing it, no one else south of the equator was doing it. And we did it for many years without anybody else doing it. But what it did was, it pointed out what was possible here. And you have then to go back to our history, you have to look carefully at who we were, you have to look carefully at what we have. And you pick up the paper in the morning and we knock things all the time. This is no good, the roads aren't here and this is falling down. And some of it might be true. But you've got to look at what we are. We're an unbelievable democracy. We have this beautiful Mediterranean weather. We have institutions that go back a very long way in the Western world. Proper universities, proper educational systems. We can walk between our hospitals. We are not caught in traffic jams on a harbour bridge. We can do things. And then you had enlightened people who facilitated it. And, you give me the opportunity to say it, we have become over-bureaucratised. With some of this great entrepreneurial stuff that we're able to achieve has now been dumbed down very badly. But we're still in the game. And enlightenment is possible. But we are special here. We don't need to get above ourselves. It's hard work. But we could do this thing, and the thing that came out of the Paris thing for me is that I have, on a day-to-day basis, pushed this view for a very long time. And then to have it fed back to me from our trainees and our colleagues around the world to say, yes, you've done the right thing. We acknowledge it. It's right. Not something else. This is right. So that was the issue.
This is right, and we are doing it right. And I just want to end on, how do we look to the future as a state?
Well, it is embracing all of these clever things that we can do. And we do have all of the wonderful technology. We do have all of the people here. We do have to think globally, and we do have to not dumb down and stultify our capacity to do it with over-regulation.
There you have it. Professor David, we are so lucky to have you in our state. Thank you very much, and congratulations on this wonderful beginning.
Thanks, Jessica.